So could AI true superpower be to scale up personalized feedback? Welcome to Learning Horizons, a place to reimagine communicating, learning, and collaborating in the digital age. For those who have followed this series, you will know that personalized feedback is one of my key AI angles, the one I really want to explore. And I am absolutely delighted today to welcome Mark. Mark Temple, who is CEO of IamELD.ai. And Mark's organizations offer great AI simulations tool for managers and leaders to practice all sorts of realistic conversations, develop their communication skills, and receive instant feedback at the end of each practice. For someone like me who has been designing and facilitating leadership programs for years, it sounds like a dream come true. And I wanted to learn more about it and how it all works. So a big thank you, Mark, for being with us today, and welcome.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me here, Gail. And I think it's such a critical topic. We really are at that point where the technology is really at the first time now where it can deliver this kind of impact at scale. So I think we're at a really exciting point of learning and development as an industry as a whole.
And I'm very curious, Mark. So how did it all started for you? What problems were you solving that attracted you to start working on AI and simulation?
Yeah, so I've actually lived in the corporate world for most of my life. So I was at Ernst& Young and then at Russell Reynolds in commercial leadership roles, particularly focusing on research and insight and how we go to market with more of an analytical approach to what we do. And what I saw at Russell Reynolds, which is an executive search and assessment organization, was really the impact that technology can start to have on personalization, on adaptation of content, of feedback, of development insight. And we were doing an awful lot of research and development around the ability to put people into simulations, which allowed them to develop particular leadership muscles, develop particular managerial competencies. And I thought that was such an exciting space. I really wanted to kind of dive into the startup world and do something that I thought could potentially change how people learn. So that was sort of the inspiration behind why I sort of why I started all of this.
And simulation is such a powerful tool, and until recently, only used for, I would say, high risk environment where the cost of failure is quite high. But it feels like now with AI, we can really have affordable, accessible, easy to use simulation tools. Do you agree with this statement, Mark?
Yeah, 100%. And even within AI, I think it's evolving very quickly. So where we first started seeing this idea of simulation and role play, perhaps in terms of improving how we do scripted sales conversations, improving how we do customer services at its outset, is now starting to get to a point where we're looking at more complex judgment-based and decision-based conversations with AI, which is challenging how leaders think, how managers think in the context of client conversations, managing teams, leading organizations through change. So I think we really sort of are at the fine end of the art of the possible here.
That sounds very exciting. But before we dwell into, looking at what it looks like and how it feels like, the part that I'm quite interested in, and we said we'll talk about it, is the feedback. At the moment, in February 2026, what does the feedback is based on? Is it assessing body language, eye contact, or is it focusing only on words and the choice of words?
Yeah. So I think there's a range of capabilities out there. We as an organization focus on a particular set. But I think there's a range of complementary technologies, particularly around sort of analysis, data analysis, and sort of video analysis, which is starting to evolve the feedback space. Where I specialize is around competency analysis. So that's what I can talk around sort of in a meaningful way. And in that space, what we're looking at is transcript analysis. So we are looking at, as somebody has a conversation with an AI, and we build out that body of information around how they respond to particular stresses, how they respond to particular challenges, issues, problems, how they solve those, generates this long transcript, this long word-based data asset that we can analyze. And what we find is, as we get more and more data, more and more of these assets at scale, our ability to deliver much more effective feedback evolves alongside that. So it's really that ability to build that body of data asset of best practices and worst practices, which AI responds incredibly effectively to in terms of improving the output of your feedback analysis. And I think that's that people aren't realizing just how high quality and how impactful this new data asset is today.
That is super interesting. And I've got a lot of questions, but maybe for the viewers who might think it's a little bit abstract what we're discussing at the moment, would it be possible to see the solutions and see it for a few minutes running to actually see what the learners are experiencing? I just want to say that for Learning Horizon, we're not endorsing any particular technology. I'm just curious to see how it works and you know, your solutions, and but just to actually get a feel for the learning experience.
Yeah, happy to. So we typically do them in either the space around client conversations, around internal stakeholder discussions, perhaps it's feedback for a team member. And so each of those are designed for the specific challenges the individual's facing, their specific context and background. So if I share one that we did recently with a learning leader going through a role transition, and I'll just share my screen and share a brief video, and then I'll share the feedback, an example of her feedback that comes off.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark.
What have we been doing as a business then, or what have been some of the key activities coming from the HR team that have been put in place to try and alleviate some of these concerns, or to drive through some of the changes that we're looking for? Because I want to see what I can do to align with those more closely.
We've tried regular briefings, Q&A sessions, and pilot groups for technology trials, plus targeted communications to address concerns. We focused on making leadership visible and responsive. However, traction is mixed. Some teams still feel disengaged, so we're actively looking for better ways to bridge those gaps.
Look, a number of the areas that I think I've seen this really land well in the past, when it's digital transformation or digital adoption, is that clear leadership, visibility and story. So, you know, I'm sure we've all had those experiences where leaders have talked a good game, but they're not using the systems themselves. So I think if we can land that, that's always going to make a significant difference. I think the second one is around supporting people as close to them doing the job as possible. Frontline teams are often the ones that are really overlooked, but I think they're the ones.
So let me pause there. I think you can see an example of the fact you're talking with an avatar. The avatar is dynamic. It's responding to the challenges or the questions or the issues that you're raising. And then at the back end, you get, this is an example of a feedback report, analyzing the competencies of the leader, providing both critical analysis on the performance, but also developmental advice in terms of how they can improve what they've done, as well as actionable steps, so particular courses that would align to those specific development needs.
So that is super realistic. I assume you will never have twice the same conversations. The avatar adapt to whatever answer you're giving, right?
Correct. So it's entirely dynamic. You can feed the avatar particular personality traits, particular archetypes or roles or contextual information to really kind of create something that is suited to the challenge that you're aiming at. And I think that the critical aspect that we think about is the learning objective. We design around the learning objective for the individual. And if you just create a generic role play, you're not creating that moment of learning for the individual that's stretching muscles that need to be stretched. So we need to design with intent And no two conversations are the same, incredibly dynamic, incredibly engaging.
That is very interesting. My next question is, so basically the way you work, the way you create the conversations, they are always bespoke to the organizations you work with, or do you also have like some standards feedback conversations or performance review conversations? How does it work?
Yeah, so we have a range of templates that are out of the box, focused on common developmental needs. So we have those around sales, strategic selling, providing managerial feedback, strategic negotiation, internal role transitions, etc. So those are out of the box and ready to go, and they can either be designed by a manager and cascaded to the teams, or they can be deployed to the teams in a way that allows for self-practice and for them to design what they need. We also provide a consulting service that designs these in a very customized way for specific clients.
And what have you noticed? When does it work best? So, because we all know that practicing is obviously a great way of improving and developing the skills. But we also need to engage with the leaders, with the managers that follow that program. In which context does it really have the best impact with the organizations, the best engagement with the learners?
Yeah, so there's a range of things that we've learned over time around this. I think the first one is trial and pilot before you deploy at scale. You need to learn how people absorb the information, how people are going to be using the tool in their day-to-day before you look to roll out. So I'd certainly advise that as part of the design process. In terms of deployment, I think about deploying it in the context of particular existing learning experiences and programs. So how can you integrate it into, say, for example, we work with a lot of sales academies, internal academies focusing on how to enhance the sales process. And we attach to that and enhance those programs, or promotion academies. Those are really, really great sites which have existing training structures that we can apply this into effectively. And the other one that I'm hearing more and more of is just in time. So just before a critical meeting, just before a client meeting, having the ability to deploy this in and use it as a practice mode. And the one you just saw, which was a role transition, was used in exactly that way.
So it's part of the toolkit, basically. It is, but it is an advanced, it's an advanced practice. It's bridging basically where we are between. We've done the program. We know why we need to do it. We know what we need to do. Let's say, we're having a transition conversation. So you're going through those motions. You know what you should be doing. You've experienced it. You've discussed it maybe in a circle or in a group. You've practiced maybe easily some role play, but now it's time to get into action. So we're bridging from the learning experience into the transferable. You practice, and what is and then what would be, you would say, the optimal number of practice?
Yeah. I think you positioned it really well. This is if we're deploying a training, say once a year at the minute, how quickly are people forgetting that? How quickly is that information sort of, it's the age-old challenge, it's the age-old learning curve where you teach and then suddenly there's this sharp drop-off of what people remember. And I think the key question is, when do you need people to remember and have this information reinforced as you go through the year? And that will change depending on the learning. But I would certainly say, with regards to things like annual training programs, getting that quarterly refresh in is going to be absolutely critical. Getting those point of time refreshes in are going to be absolutely critical to making sure that you are maintaining that optimal level of learning.
Excellent. And we are in the age of measuring impact, which is absolutely essential in 2026 to get budgets.
Yeah.
how do you work with your clients to measure the transformation?
Yeah. So it depends on what you're teaching. So really we align with the clients around the KPIs that are associated with the particular field of focus. So what we're seeing around sales, strategic negotiation, it's that alignment with the ability to sell and convert more. We are seeing some really interesting movements towards integrations with things like your CRMs and your sales pipeline data to see where we can look at direct linkages in that regard. We also then look at some of the softer elements around feedback from the participants in terms of how they feel it's impacted their learning. The challenge, I think, for a lot of organizations when it comes to softer skills is it's really hard to put metrics on how effectively somebody's developed as a leader. It's really hard to put metrics on how effective somebody has done feedback. But what we've got here now is, for the first time, an ability to show a transcript and evaluate a transcript with a common benchmark to say, this is what best in class looks like. This is how these individuals have performed against what we would consider best in class. Let's look at how that's evolving over time. I think this, as I said, I mean, I think this is going to become one of the key data points in the future as we look at learning KPIs.
And that leads me to actually something that I'm concerned about. It's what do we do with the learners' data? So let's say I'm an aspiring leader. I'm going to do a few of those conversations, but then purposely or unpurposely, I'm going to do a bad job out of those conversations, right? Who is accessing the data, and how is it, how could it potentially impact my future?
Yeah. So I think there's two sides to the data privacy component. The first side is, how is the technology itself storing that data? And it's key for companies to focus on information security, GDPR, the impact of new regulations like the EU AI Act, and making sure that they're creating that degree of security and comfort for their users. And then the second component is the internal organizational piece. And we've had this discussion with clients recently, and it's a hard choice to make, because if you're going to use something as a development tool, you're going to get great uptake. If people feel like they're being judged, the uptake is going to be much, much harder. So, a great case in point was, we were talking with a major global retail, online retailer, and they were saying, look, we want to deploy it, but can you deploy it so that to the user it looks purely developmental, no scores, but to the manager they can see the scores in the background? And, is that the right way to go? I'm not sure. But what we know is managers and leaders are asking these questions to try and navigate their way in a very, very new world, to try and navigate their way between that conflict between building appetite with this new technology that can really drive engagement versus using it as an assessment and evaluation tool.
And what would be your recommendation to those leaders?
So I think my recommendation for the leaders is the power of this as a development tool is such that getting uptake in the first instance, getting appetite in the first instance for people using it is key. And then in the future, shifting towards more of an assessment and evaluation component once it's become a natural foundational component of development within an organization is a sensible next step. That would be one perspective. The second perspective is, use the skills data, instead of using it for evaluatory purposes, use it for developmental purposes. Use it for assessing, where do I need to invest in more training? Where is there opportunity from a skills mobility perspective, particularly for folks who are perhaps, lacking from an accessibility angle, opportunities that others may have access to. And this data is saying, actually, this person's really great. Let's get more out of them. Let's find more opportunities for them. And I think if you can really showcase how you're using that data for positive opportunity generation and developmental purposes, again, it's going to create a really great positive reinforcement loop.
That is very interesting. We all know that for people to grow, there needs to be an element of trust. And a lot of surveys, I think the Gallup is one of them, but a lot of surveys around the world have shown that trust in the system, in the development system, and believing that your organizations and your managers got your best interest at heart is key. Is key for engagement, it's key for retention, and it's key for growth and development. However, those tools are very ambivalent, and there is always this risk for people to think that even though it looks like it's just for development purposes, it can be used differently, and that would certainly affect the trust in not only in the development process but in the organization. How do we navigate that challenge, especially us as learning providers? What should be our messaging around all of this?
Yeah, I mean, we as an organization actually see this as a core message for leaders when we talk about investing in these types of technology, that we need to invest in AI that develops people, not in AI that streamlines the organization. This is something that is such a critical part of getting people as a whole to accept AI, which is using it in ways that are going to be developmental. In terms of getting specific, in terms of sort of learning managers, learning training leaders, trying to get this messaging through with their users, again, I think the key focus area here is on, this is for your development. This is for your positive, we are making this investment to invest in you as a person. As we see it as an evaluation technology, then I think we need to just be very cautious about not mixing those messages. If it's an evaluation tool, let's very, very clearly set it as an evaluation tool. Let's not try and muddle these two up and say it's both a development and an assessment tool, because you're just going to build resentment that way.
Absolutely. There is also the element of, are we taking the risk that it becomes the new e-learning? The e-learning where people go and click, click, click. They have to do it. So let's say they have to do the practice. So they go through the practice. They think it was a development purpose so that nobody will see the data. And now you've got someone perfectly capable, but we're having a bad day and decided to do that instead of, doing something else. Was doing a very average job and being penalized for it. So that's kind of say that it's, if it's an evaluation tools, people have to be aware they're being evaluated, because otherwise they may not just take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, a case in point, I was talking with a financial services company 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about their need to be adhering to regulatory standards when it came to client conversations. And for them, actually, this is very explicitly an assessment tool, because they want to make sure that people are compliant. And the challenge at the minute is they run e-learnings and they get their assistants to go tick, tick, tick through their e-learning and try and get through it as quickly as possible. And they were saying, look, the challenge is here, people aren't seeing a behavioral change, and we need something that people can't cheat. And so can we bring this in? And in terms of, horses for courses, picking something specifically for an assessment component and designing it in such a way, then, I think that's sort of a very clear use and intent. To your question around, is this going to become the new e-learning issue? I would say there are well-designed e-learnings and there are poorly designed e-learnings. There are wonderful e-learnings out there, and I've been on e-learnings that have been engaging. They've been incredibly relevant, incredibly well-designed. And I've been on e-learnings which are the cybersecurity 1 hour, you've got to tick your way through it and it's an absolute grind. And I think the same is going to come with these types of interactive simulation. I think you're going to have very mass market versions which are produced in a very generic way, which will have, no doubt, a degree of compliance to them, and people will find them a real pain to have to grind through. Whereas on the flip side, you're going to have incredibly well-designed ones. We come from a behavioral psychology, a behavioral and organizational psychology background, so we design with intent around that. We see great organizations coming up with some of the more augmented and virtual reality type technology. We see great ones coming up with instruction-led technology in this space. And I think there are going to be applications which are going to be game-changing when designed well and when applied well.
That is super interesting. And my last question would be in terms of what would be the next step for this technology, for the industry. What do you see is coming next?
Yeah, I would always say for people, before you think about the next step, think about the today. And I would say this is advanced technology that is now today. It's robust, it works incredibly well, but don't try and digest it all at once. Do it in a small fashion, baby steps, do a pilot, do multiple pilots, try these things out with people on the front lines and get their feedback. I think that's absolutely key. In terms of, where does this go next in the future? I think now it's looking at applications. It's looking at how we can change development and accelerate development in critical application areas across organizations and institutions as being, I think it was Ethan Mollick who said a few months ago in one of his posts, we've got enough technology out there now that it's going to take 20 years for industry to really absorb all the use cases. So now really it's about finding those high impact use cases that are really going to change the game.
That is brilliant. So let's absorb, digest, play with it, and try. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time today. It was a real pleasure. For those of you who are watching, if you want to watch the video in total that we said, it will be in the show note on the thinkskills.net webpage. And then I encourage you to try it and try it to see how it works and be innovative in the way we think slightly differently about learning and behavior change. Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.